Let's go now, Lauren, to Bill McGurn, who joins us. He's the Wall Street Journal columnist, Bill, a Fox contributor as well. Let's cover this in order. I'll go to this president's first on the speech, and then maybe we'll talk a little bit about these stimulus talks in D.C., Bill. But, I think Blake is right, characterizing, as a president can't get out and do the traditional campaign rallies. This, at times, sounded in tone like one of those. But when he did talk about the economy, you're struck by the fact that this is not, in the middle of this campaign, a traditional Republican president, as we know, by any means, on whether it's trade policy, tariffs are coming back, or he talked a lot about lowering drug prices as well. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, definitely it's not the traditional campaign, but it is a campaign speech. Look, I worked in a White House. In election season, every speech is more or less a campaign speech. And the president's taking advantage of it. And he's going to places, like factories, speaking to workers that Republican presidents don't usually go, with a message that he's standing up for them. That's the larger thing. Now, I think actually I'm a little skeptical of some of the managed trade and so forth. I could see why that's popular. I would like to see the president emphasize more that the way to keep American jobs is to make America attractive to invest for people here. And that's what he did. He did with tax cuts. He did with this deregulation, which he mentioned today. These are the primary ways to ensure that the American people have jobs waiting for them when they, when they grow up and take their place in the economy.
Now, in the short term, as you know, millions of Americans do not have jobs right now, and they're waiting to figure out, or waiting for Congress to figure out what they do next on these stimulus talks that Blake reported on. How do you think that all ends up? And what are your thoughts on the merits of the president using executive action if we don't get a deal here pretty soon?
Well, it depends on the particular executive action. One, whether he has authority to do what he proposes to do, and two, whether it's a good idea. Again, on the stimulus, I have a slightly different read. When you look at the papers, most of it talks about, Democrats and Republicans kind of coming to the middle on a deal, and that the difference is dollars and so forth and scale. I think that the differences really are priorities. I'm not sure the Democrats really want the economy to reopen now. I think that what they've proposed in their $3 million package is traditional Democratic spending. And you look at just one little area of contention that I think illustrates this. Democrats are very opposed to any school aid going to schools that physically reopen. Well, those are schools that will really need it because they'll have to adapt. I think the Republicans are playing defensive ball here. What they should be doing is highlighting these different approaches, saying, we're trying to reopen the economy, help people get back on their feet. There's no substitute for the job. I think most American people want to get back to work, and the Democrats are trying to block it with a lot of actions that will just prolong what we're in now and make it more expensive to hire workers.
It all reminds us that this is all happening, this entire pandemic, in an election year, and you wonder how it would be different, if it would be different at all, if it weren't. But especially on that issue that you brought up, back to school, there's a lot of passion on both sides of that. Just people notice it in their everyday lives, I'm sure. All parents are talking to each other. What's your child doing? What's your child doing? How is that playing out in the political campaign, do you think? And in terms of whether one candidate, the president or former Vice President Biden, stands to benefit from the way they're handling it?
Well, I don't know who's going to benefit, but there are clear differences. The president is on record wanting people to go back. And we don't hear anymore? We don't hear in this context the talk of science. The CDC says that getting kids back into classrooms for in-person instruction is a public health matter, and that not doing it particularly hurts low-income and minority children who don't have, say, alternatives of tutors and other places they could go. And I think that the president would do well to press that difference and sharpen it and see what the Democrats choose. Again, we hear all this talk about science, but the CDC is on record saying go back, and the teachers' unions, one of the most powerful constituencies inside the Democratic Party, is fighting it.
All right, Bill McGurn, thank you for standing by with us as the president has now wrapped up those remarks in Ohio. We appreciate it as always.